Welcome in. Today, we're really diving deep into a fascinating part of history that you might not be too familiar with Zimbabwean Jewry.
Yeah, it's a
And get this,
It's a story that deserves.
we're talking about a community that was connected to some really big names. Cecil Rhodes, the Rothschilds, you name it.
way more attention for sure.
We're digging into excerpts from Majuda.pdf and Rhodesian Jewry and its story. Trust me, these sources are absolute gold mines.
We're talking about a community that faced some serious challenges. I mean, from the Matabele Rebellion to the rise of Zionism, major historical events.
And they didn't just survive.
That they thrived.
They thrived. It's amazing, actually. And by the end of this deep dive, you're going to have a totally new perspective on Zimbabwean history. Okay, so I got to admit, when I first started looking into this, I was blown away. I always thought Cecil Rhodes was like the big man on campus when it came to early Rhodesia.
Right.
But Majuda.pdf mentions this guy, Jonas Berkheil,
Oh, yeah.
who was already making moves before Rhodes even showed up.
For Rhodes.
This guy, Berkheil, he was involved in Lubengula's original land concession, which was a big deal back then. And then, get this, he later helps build South Africa's very first railway. It's wild how these events were all connected. So was it common back then to find Jewish pioneers right in the thick of things, even in those early days?
Oh, absolutely. Berkheil's story is a great example of that. He wasn't just some businessman looking to make a quick buck,
Right.
This guy founded a settlement that became really important for the region. And get this, he even served in the Natal Legislative Council.
Talk about a community builder. He was the real deal. And his story, it really goes to show you how incredibly talented and influential these early Jewish pioneers really were.
Speaking of influential figures, Rhodesian Jewry and its story tells the story about a guy named Paddy Cohen.
Okay.
And Cohen, he had this land concession from Lubengula that put him right in the path of Cecil Rhodes' ambitions. Now, you'd think Rhodes would just steamroll right over him, right?
You think so, yeah.
But no, they actually negotiated. Cohen was clearly a savvy guy. What's the significance of this whole interaction?
Well, what's fascinating here is the power dynamic at play. You've got Cohen, who represents, I'd say, individual enterprise going head-to-head with Rhodes, who, by this point, had the backing of empires.
Wow. It's true. Rhodes ultimately gets his way, but Cohen's persistence is something else. He keeps fighting for his claims, and it really reflects this incredible resilience that you see time and time again with these early pioneers. They weren't giving up easily.
It's really amazing to see that kind of determination,
Oh, absolutely.
especially when you're up against someone like Cecil Rhodes.
Right. He was a force to be reckoned with, that's for sure.
And it gets even wilder when you realize Rhodes, the diamond magnate himself, actually sought backing from the Rothschilds.
Wow, talk about a power move.
We're talking about the Rothschilds, the global banking dynasty.
He wasn't messing around.
So, that's not just asking for money. That's bringing in a heavyweight champion to back you up. What does that tell you about Rhodes' strategy?
It tells me he was thinking long term. He knew that for something to last, to really have an impact, it needed more than just political maneuvering. He needed legitimacy,
Right.
especially in the eyes of the world's financial elite.
Makes sense.
And having the Rothschilds on your side, well, that's not just about the money.
No.
It's a stamp of approval, and it carries a lot of weight.
Wow. Yeah, it echoes across continents.
Exactly.
It's mind-blowing to think about these big players making deals that would shape the future of a nation.
It really is.
But, it wasn't all sunshine and rainbows for the Jewish community in Rhodesia.
Right.
Because Majuda.pdf talks about this unsettling rise of anti-Semitism.
Yeah, unfortunately, it's a pattern we see too often throughout history.
And what's really strange is that this happened as the Jewish community was growing and prospering. It seems like, I don't know, kind of a contradiction.
Well, my guess is that early tolerance toward Jews in Rhodesia was likely because they were a small group and were seen as economically valuable.
Yeah.
But as they become more visible, more successful, especially with the wave of immigrants coming in from Eastern Europe,
Yeah.
well, those old anxieties about resources, social order, they probably started to bubble up.
It's sad how often that happens.
It really is.
And it's in that climate that things get even more complex because Rhodesian Jewry and its story describes how, during the Matabele Rebellion, this community that's facing increasing prejudice is suddenly thrust into this conflict
Wow.
that they didn't start,
Right.
but they still step up and help defend Bulawayo.
That's pretty incredible.
It really is.
Yeah.
How did that experience, being in that position, How do you think that shapes their identity?
Well, imagine being in their shoes for a second.
Yeah.
You're facing discrimination in this land where you're trying to build a future,
Right.
and then a rebellion breaks out.
Wow. Yeah.
So their involvement, I think, speaks volumes about their commitment to Rhodesia as their home.
Yeah.
They were invested in their community's well-being,
It's true.
even while navigating this society full of racial and social tensions.
Like a resilience. Right.
Absolutely.
And hold on tight, because the story gets even more interesting. Even in those early days, far from the center of it all, the Zimbabwean Jewish community was deeply connected to the Zionist movement. Yeah. Rhodesian Jewry in its story talks about visits from prominent Zionist figures, and Majuda.pdf even mentions their fundraising efforts.
Wow.
It's amazing to me that this community, so far away, was so plugged into this global movement. What do you think drove that connection?
Well, I think Zionism at its core offered a powerful vision.
Okay.
You've got Jews scattered across the diaspora.
Right.
And for them, it promised a homeland,
Right.
a refuge, a chance to shape their own destiny.
That's huge.
Exactly. And remember, this is a time when communication was slow, travel was difficult.
Right.
Yet this idea of a Jewish homeland, it resonated so deeply.
It's powerful.
It connected communities across continents.
It's incredible.
Well, for sure.
And we're not just talking about, sending good vibes from afar. I mean, Majuda.pdf mentions Charles Salomon, a prominent member of the community, who made this massive donation that funded a ton of projects in Tel Aviv.
Wow.
And this is a community still finding its footing, facing challenges.
Right.
But they were incredibly generous.
That's amazing.
That's remarkable. What does that say about their values?
It speaks to a value that's deeply rooted in Jewish tradition, tikkun olam.
Okay.
It means repairing the world.
I love that.
Right. Think about it. Here they are, building a life in a new land,
Yeah.
facing uncertainty, even hostility at times.
Yeah, it's true.
But they still prioritized helping others, both within their community and beyond.
That's amazing.
It really is a testament to their resilience, their commitment to a better future, not just for themselves, but for the Jewish people as a whole.
And, speaking of building a community,
Yeah.
both Majuda.pdf and Rhodesian Jewry in its story mention the challenges of doing just that.
Of course.
Building a Jewish community from scratch in a new land.
Right. It wasn't just about, bricks and mortar. It
No.
was about bringing together different groups with their own traditions and finding a way to make it work.
It's about finding a balance.
Exactly. And Rhodesian Jewry in its story specifically talks about some tension that existed between the Sephardic and Ashkenazi Jews.
Really?
Yeah, which isn't surprising when you think about it.
Right.
Got different cultural backgrounds, historical experiences, all coming together in this new environment.
It's a melting pot, but it's not always a smooth process.
Precisely.
It makes you realize that, creating a cohesive community,
It's a process.
it takes work.
Absolutely.
And Majuda.pdf really emphasizes how important the Jewish community's religious organizations were.
Right.
And not just for, religious practice,
Of course.
but for social connection, for support.
Yeah, it was like a built-in support system.
Absolutely, because think about it. You've left behind everything familiar, maybe even loved ones,
Right.
and you arrive in this new place with a different language, different customs.
It's a lot to process.
It is. So these organizations, they offered a haven, a place to connect with people who understood your traditions.
Absolutely.
Your language, your humor even.
Exactly. A home away from home.
It makes perfect sense that those institutions would become so central to their lives.
They were vital.
They were.
Oh.
But both books also touch on the hurdles they faced, trying to maintain those religious practices in a place like Rhodesia.
Yeah, like finding kosher food.
Exactly. Getting religious leaders materials for Jewish education.
Yeah.
It couldn't have been easy.
No, not at all. Especially being thousands of miles away from established Jewish centers.
Right?
It really speaks to their dedication.
It does.
That they were willing to go the extra mile to maintain those traditions.
It's inspiring.
And Rhodesian Jewry and its story tells this amazing story about the construction of the first synagogue in Bulawayo.
Okay.
They start building, and then bam, the Matabele rebellion erupts.
Oh.
Everything's put on hold.
Wow.
But they eventually laid a foundation stone in 1897.
Okay.
And get this, it coincides with Queen Victoria's Diamond Jubilee.
Wow, what a moment.
Talk about symbolic timing.
It gives me chills.
It's a powerful statement about their commitment to both their faith and their new home.
It's beautifully put.
And building a synagogue,
Yeah.
it's a huge undertaking.
Right.
It requires resources, dedication, this shared vision for the future.
It really does.
So to complete it after all that upheaval,
Yeah.
it just demonstrates their incredible resilience.
Wow, that's a powerful image.
It really is.
And speaking of commitment, Majuda.pdf also mentions how active